AFC West time, Sam, starting with the Denver Broncos. Got my trusty composite grades. Where's this coming from again?
Rene, I again haven't.
Buchner.
Yeah. At RNBWCV on Twitter.
So this is pre-Thor. I've mentioned Thor on every show. This is pre-Thor. Right. I don't know if that changed the GPAs, if there's an updated version. I don't know, but I printed it out. And so the composite grading scale that has about 20 different sources here, that's what we're referencing. And so on the composite, the Denver Broncos come in 28th.
Oh, hang on. There is an updated one.
There is.
There is. So this one has 28 people on it.
Wow.
Oh, let's pivot to this one. Here, I'll send it to you.
Can you print it and get it up?
No printing. You're going to have to work digitally.
I like the hard
copy, like the rest of the human population.
All right, so where
Thor did, in fact, adjust things, as did Evan Silva with a couple of Fs in there.
Look at Evan getting out there. That's good. So Evan, okay, just so we know, Evan had Fs for the Panthers and the Falcons. People really hated the Falcons thing.
Yeah.
I knew Thor would.
Yes.
But he does it based off the players that he likes.
Two new people, 2 of the 8 new people are harsher than Falcons fan Charles McDonald, who gave them a D-.
So here we are. So Denver's down to 29th on the composite here. It ranges from A- per PFF down to D.
Thor gave the Patriots an F.
Did he not like Drake May?
No, apparently not.
He was a J.J. McCarthy guy. So anyway, Broncos. I liked the Broncos draft. Of course, it starts with Bo Nix, and say what you want about Bo Nix. I mean, look, I would not, in a vacuum, want to take Bo Nix at 12.
Right.
This was you need a quarterback type of play, and we don't have a second rounder to get one.
Yeah, but so this is the interesting process discussion. Number one, do we buy the idea that Denver thinks that Bo Nix in a vacuum was, like the conversation we've had for Michael Penix, right? Part of it hinges on the Falcons evidently believe Michael Penix Jr. was a lot better than the consensus, which put him in at number 31 overall. Now, Bo Nix was number 35 overall, so same kind of area, and he went a few picks later. Do we buy the same argument for Denver and Bo Nix and the fact that the NFL was with them, right? Because that's part of this. Not just were you independently of the opinion that he's way better, but part of the Falcons' backup is that a lot of the league seems to have felt the same thing. Do we think, A, Denver is of the same opinion with Bo Nix, and B, the rest of the NFL was along with them, and actually it's just the outside world was lower on these guys? Or are we dealing with this is the 2024 version of Christian Ponder, Jake Locker, that class of QBs where they just got pushed up to an area they never belonged?
I think people really liked Penix. I'll tell you, here's what we know. We know that multiple teams value Drake May, including the Giants and the Vikings. We're pretty sure about that as far as who was trying to trade up.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. I know for a fact that the Falcons loved Michael Penix Jr. There's no debating that. They drafted him at 8 while already having Kirk Cousins. I'm not getting inside info. This is a definitive, the information in front of us. They picked him at 8.
Right.
Defines that.
But what we don't know is how many other people.
I'm pretty sure other people were also trying to get up to get Michael Penix.
But that's key, because just you liking the guy that much, it's not like it's irrelevant, but that's how you get John Gruden, Mike Mayock drafts. That's how you get Christian Ponder. That was also 12 overall, right? So
it was.
Just one team liking it is not reason enough to say, okay, it's cool. You need the justification of, well, at least multiple other teams, some kind of plurality of the NFL felt the same way. I think there's enough reports about Michael Penix that we can say that reasonably for the Falcons. They loved him more than everyone else, and actually it seems like quite a few other teams did as well. Denver's in a tougher spot because they're lower down in the draft. There's just fewer teams for whom that would be an option anyway. On the other hand, if other teams had felt the same way, they might have taken him earlier than that. You know what I mean? So it's harder to make that justification for Denver, which puts them more on an island of you might have just reached for the guy that you desperately needed because you had no other option.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I'm still okay with it because the alternative is you have Jarrett Stidham. There's a chance you don't get Bo Nix, so I think it was the clear 6 in this draft. And look, I said,
but is that worse than reaching for Christian Ponder? Not saying Bo Nix is Christian Ponder, but if that's now in the range of outcomes if you believe that they reached significantly for a quarterback simply because they needed
one. As
one.
you keep saying, the counterfactual is the other quarterback situation that you were going to have.
Right.
But
that's Jarrett Stidham. If Bo Nix ends up being Christian Ponder, Jarrett Stidham for a year is no worse, and you kept draft picks intact.
Look, it's always probabilistic how you're approaching this. There might only be a 10% chance that Bo Nix is your next franchise quarterback, or a 25% chance that he's a reasonable quarterback on a rookie contract. You kind of have to play that game, though. And Denver's playing that game.
I don't know that you do, though. That's the thing. Like, I think at some point, because otherwise you would effectively advocate, like the Raiders should have then drafted Spencer Rattler at 13 because he's the next guy. You need a quarterback. Go get him. Like, at some point there has to be an acknowledgement of.
I mean, the evaluation has to be in there somewhere. Bo Nix, by most evaluations, is going to be higher than Spencer Rattler.
Sure. But I don't think you can say, like, they needed a quarterback, ergo they simply had to take one. Like, at some point, if your evaluation says this guy is not worth that, it's not worth taking him.
Well, they did. And they're going to tell you that he was their guy.
Because of the backpack.
He was the sixth quarterback off the board. Do you have thoughts on Bo Nix and the fit here to Denver?
So I do think it's a good fit, and this is part of why I think it's a difficult thing to parse whether they really felt this way about him, because I do think like it's a natural fit. A lot of people were connecting these two dots of, Bo Nix is the quarterback that Sean Payton would zero in on and would identify and those kinds of things. He's accurate. One of the most accurate quarterbacks in this draft. I think that's something that Sean Payton covets. It's interesting they circle back later in the draft for Troy Franklin, arguably Bo Nix's favorite target at Oregon. But yeah, there's definitely, I can see why Sean Payton, at the very minimum, would look at Bo Nix and say, whether or not he was his top target, his top three targets, he'd look at him and say, I can work with that. He's accurate, he's athletic, he's got a reasonable arm, certainly good enough. I can make this work. I can make it function, and to an extent, that might be your biggest selling point. Like, he just simply identified accurately what he is and says, yeah, I can make that work. I created an offense around Taysom Hill. I can make Bo Nix operable in the NFL.
I do think the fit is fun for Sean Payton. I think when you think about, look, I don't know, what is a Sean Payton offense? It's tough to really tell because he did have Drew Brees for so long, and sometimes the offense morphs in to what your Hall of Fame quarterback is doing. And Drew Brees was a quick game savant who could throw the ball down the field extremely accurately. He could do it all, right? But it was very much predicated on, underneath, quick decisions, getting rid of the ball and throwing the ball on time and accurately. So if you want to say, hey, that's what Sean Payton's offense is, fine. I don't know that that's really what it is, because all we've seen since then is like a little bit of Jameis Winston, a little bit of Taysom Hill, and a little bit of Russell Wilson in this offense.
Teddy.
And who?
Teddy.
And Teddy, right? Like Teddy has a back. Teddy was running the Drew Brees offense as his backup. But I would say Bo Nix, of all the guys that Sean Payton's had, is probably the closest stylistically to Drew Brees in what you would want. And the last time I get to make this statement, till the next time I do it, Bo Nix in college went from playing like Jay Cutler to playing like Alex Smith. When he was at Auburn, as I pull up some data points here, he was in the 11th percentile at avoiding negatively graded plays. Horrible, right? Throwing the ball to the defense, missing throws left and right, and he wasn't adding a whole bunch of positives. And then he goes to Oregon, and his final 2 seasons of college, 98th percentile at avoiding negatively graded plays, and 99th percentile in sack rate. I'll say this. Well, let me just go to the negatives.
As in avoiding sacks. One of the best that we've seen at avoiding sacks. Now, those things go hand in hand, right? As they might correlate to the next level pretty highly or whatever, but those go hand in hand. The fact that the Oregon offense got rid of the ball so quickly, it was a very much underneath-driven offense, but Bo Nix ran it extremely well. So that's why he avoided negatives. He didn't miss a lot of throws. He didn't take a lot of sacks. I will say that about Bo Nix and Michael Penix. For the analytics folks who were one-issue voters oftentimes, throughout the single-issue voters, right, throughout the draft process. Like, just look at sack rate. Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. look great. If you're just looking at sack rate,
suggest you don't just look at one number, but that is one thing where those guys were better than the 4 guys drafted ahead of them, or the 3. In Penix's case, 3 guys that drafted ahead of him. Say of all the first-round quarterbacks, Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr. were the best at avoiding sacks. So Bo Nix has played a similar kind of offense that I think Sean Payton wants to run. So at least through that lens, I think it's a nice fit.
I was reading an Albert Breer article about the sort of quarterback decisions at the top of the draft, and he was making a point of Oregon scheduled their pro day for March the 12th, which was the day between the opening of the legal tampering period thing and the day where people actually signed. Consequently, like, nobody of significance went, right? Because all the GMs are actually busy.
Who's pro day?
Bo Nix. So all the GMs
Oregon.
And stuff. Yes.
You said Auburn, I thought.
I'm pretty sure I said Oregon.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
That all the GMs and the head coaches and stuff were busy, signing free agents and negotiating and stuff. So nobody actually went to Bo Nix's pro day except scouts and blah, blah, blah. So they all had to work from the tape. There weren't, I was there scouting for Bo Nix. You know what I mean?
That's why he fell to 6.
Exactly. Now, apparently, George Payton had 4 live exposures to Nix. Once when he was still at Auburn in 2022. I don't know how useful that was. And then a couple of games at Oregon. So, I'm just saying that might be why people didn't like Bo Nix, because nobody got to see him at his pro day.
That's a good point. Look at us digging down. And then
no, they did. They saw it, but only on tape, and that just doesn't count.
I will continue to ask evaluators what they get out of the live exposures. You usually get the canned answers, right? You get the usual answers. I want to see him on the sideline. I want to see how his teammates rally around him. This is, forget Top Golf. This is the true alpha test. You're in game situation. I want to see his body language. I want to watch those things. I can buy those things. The tricky part about the in-game exposure, as I've said, I mean, I thought Ray Davis was running back 1 because of his one game. You can't let the bias of how a guy played in the game that you happen to be there outweigh, the other 59 games that Bo Nix played.
Yep.
I mean, chances are the dude played 60 games. Chances are you're going to have a few live exposures if you go to any college football games. Bo Nix played in half the games over the last 5 years.
And then with 60 games, you would assume some of them were good.
Yeah, and four is not that many.
Right.
In the grand scheme of things. Anyway, I like Bo Nix as far as the fit for Sean Payton. I think Denver had to make the move anyway. I think you and I liked their next 4 picks too. Jonah Ellis, the edge out of Utah. Troy Franklin, the receiver out of Oregon, again, who we were calling for in the late 1st, early 2nd. Chris Abrams-Drain, the cornerback out of Missouri. And then Audric Estime, the running back out of Notre Dame. Yeah,
Jonah Ellis, I think, is a really nice pick. He's productive. He's explosive. I think he's got a chance to absolutely be a contributor as a pass rushing specialist on third downs. Troy Franklin obviously is one that certainly I loved and most people at PFF. Regardless of where you had him in the rankings, it was almost certainly a lot higher than 102 overall. I don't think anybody had him there. I was, talking to actual NFL people who were like, I literally asked, I was like, dude, is there, once a guy falls beyond a certain point, you're like, is there something we don't know?
What don't we know? Right.
Medical, character, attitude, whatever. So I was texting some NFL people. And I was like, why is he falling? I don't understand. And they were like, there's no medical, attitude, character, nothing that we know of that's causing this. Like, he's just falling for football reasons, and they didn't get it either. So I think Troy Franklin's an absolute steal there. Generally speaking, I've always been a fan of reuniting a quarterback that you're drafting, a rookie quarterback, with one of his favorite college targets. I don't even think it necessarily needs to make an impact in terms of that receiver in the NFL, but I think it can't be a bad thing to add that guy to this team just to help him settle or whatever. When that guy's Troy Franklin, I'm even more excited about it.
Stylistically, the way he runs routes, having that familiarity with the Bo Nix, I think helps.
Yeah, like Franklin, I think, has really big-time ability. And I want to be careful to not guarantee or do anything crazy. I would be incredibly surprised if Troy Franklin did not significantly outperform this draft slot. I genuinely think he's got the talent to be a much more important player than people are factoring in. And part of this is, so, you can compare him directly to Brian Thomas Jr. and say these were 2 guys that were both primarily deep, one-dimensional, if you like, deep threats, et cetera, et cetera. And then people will separate them saying, yeah, but Brian Thomas Jr. ran a 4.3. Whereas Troy Franklin ran a 4.4, and he's bigger, 200 plus pounds versus 180 or whatever. Troy Franklin at the combine was coming right off a stomach bug of some description, which number one cost him weight, number two cost him speed. So both of his numbers that people are using to like criticize him might be soft. If he's actually a 190 receiver that runs a 4.35 or a 4.33, like matches Brian Thomas. Well, now again, why are we separating them by 3 rounds?
Something Troy Franklin's agent would say.
Is it now?
Yeah, stomach bug, affected training, affects my 40 time, weight was down.
This came out before the combine, though.
I know,
This was not after.
That was Derek Barnett that year, remember? Like,
Right.
oh, my man's sick. Don't look at these combine numbers. My man's sick right now.
Quick, how do we fight back against that?
It's an interesting world for me, Sam, because I was touting Troy Franklin as a very high model guy, as was Marvin Mims last year, who went in the second round for the Broncos. They'll be teammates now. I do think Troy Franklin's vertical skill set, Marvin Mims' vertical skill set, we'll see what happens with Cortland Sutton there. He's been, in trade rumors, Tim Patrick coming back off of injury. You might have a nice combination of big-bodied threats like Cortland Sutton and Tim Patrick, and then your vertical threats in Mims and Franklin, even though they're a little bit smaller, slighter. Could be a nice, interesting receiver group in Denver.
Yep.
And then, you mentioned Jonah Ellis. Was it the best 3-cone we've seen for an edge? Of all the – I've cited a bunch. Like, you don't find starting edge defenders in rounds 2 and 3, or at least impact edge defenders in rounds 2 and 3. Historically, but Jonah Ellis,
6'9", at 253 pounds.
Jonah Ellis at 21 years old with good production, not great, good production. That 3-cone reminded me a little bit of Alex Highsmith from a potential give him a couple of years and he could become the quote unquote 10 sack guy, but he could become an impact pass rush type. Getting him in the round 3 at pick 76. I'll say this for teams that have just 7 picks. In no second.
Right.
We talked about this with the Browns, who didn't have a first. Sometimes you look at the draft and it's like, okay, there's nothing that really stands out there. But you could really look at Denver's draft and say, they got Bo Nix, they got Franklin, who could have been a first or second rounder. I know that the NFL obviously didn't value him there. Ellis in the 3rd. Abrams-Drain, I think I could have taken as high as the 3rd. I think they got all those guys in a really good high-value spots.
Yeah, I wrote down on my notes for Jonah Ellis that, like, he is my mid-round pass rush want. Like, he's the guy I would identify in those mid rounds, which admittedly, you've pointed out before, does not have a particularly good track record of finding guys in those. He's the guy I would want. He's twitchy. He's got good quickness, burst. He's got a really nice inside spin move that, the Dwight Freeney move.
Another Alex Highsmith thing.
Right. Yeah. Highsmith's got a great one as well. I'm not saying he is Dwight Freeney or Alex Highsmith, but he's got that move. That's his inside counter. He rolls right across offensive tackles, and they just don't have any shot of blocking it. He's got some strength concerns at that size, but as a pass rush specialist in that area of the draft, I think it's a steal.
Then we'll add, Chris Abrams-Drain, I think can compete outside or inside at corner. And then Audric Estime, who I did not realize until we were on the live show, is an absolute legend with the Stock Exchange guys, with Trevor and Connor. Right. A legend. And Estime, a legend here, too. The Costanza model, the hand model, loving Audric Estime and getting him in the 5th round. I think he's got a chance to be a nice, productive back to go into the backfield with Javonte Williams and undersized jitterbug Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah, there's a number of backs in this class because it's such a kind of chaotic group that if you fast forwarded 2 years and told me he's the best back from this class, it wouldn't shock me at all. Estime is definitely one of them. Like, he's big, explosive. I think he's faster than his timed speed would suggest. He can run away from people. I think he's just got a really good feel for the position. And, when you listen to Sean Payton talk about how they're going to use him, I think it'll be reasonably smart. Like, I think he could definitely be a part of a backfield by committee there.
Anyone to highlight on the UDFA front?
Ooh, good question.
Before we move on from Denver. Are you prepared for that?
They didn't sign a couple of Mercer receivers, thankfully. Let's see.
No one understands your reference here.
I know. That's part of the charm. Frank Crum, offensive tackle out of Wyoming.
Crum, developmental athletic tackle out of Wyoming.